Every time I read the script, every time there was a new hope that it would get together, I'd read it again, and every time it was a revelation to me.
All my early experience was with comedy.
This was not a funny movie.
No, it wasn't. No, I don't think there was a smile.
No, not many laughs.
And we've put them in as they've come up. I mean, you know, not with any great plan in mind.
Basically, the dramatic potential is established between in context between the rough life of the Philadelphia detective and or how you would characterize the life of the Amish. Just 2 hours, just 2 hours from Philadelphia is this total anomaly. There's a line in the script where my partner asks me where I am, and I say, oh, about 1870. I think there's a lot of dramatic potential in that contrast. And then the relationship story of these two people, the Philadelphia cop and the Amish woman, isn't something you've seen a lot of in the last couple of years. It's an original idea. I'm very pleased to be working with Peter Weir, whose work I admire, and who is bringing to this film a real style and strong construction. He directs the entire film in a kangaroo suit. That's the only difference I've noticed between American and Australian directors. I don't know if they all do that, but I find it very interesting.
This woman really is very much as a woman would have been 200 years ago. And here is a man from the current, right from the moment, from the very edge of the darkness of the city. And there's great drama, but of course it leads to fantastic comedy.
The contrast is very dramatic for this location. The tempo of the film and the opening sequences matches the intensity of life in a big city like Philadelphia. So when we get out here, it's pretty easy to be seduced by the charm of this kind of country. That's the whole idea of shooting a film on location. You get a lot more out of it than you might imagine. And this is a real story. It's about people who really do live this way today. And we really couldn't have captured it anyplace but on location. I read the script while I was doing Temple of Doom, and I read it many times over a period of about 6 months.
Witness for me was unlike any other project, in the sense that a month after reading it, I was on a plane to go and make it.
Witness came to us in about 187-page form, which had been really overwritten to death by a couple of other directors along the way. Even though the script was long, I just felt that the idea of a cop in Amish country was very original.
Well, it's a very interesting context in which to place a man of the world, a guy who has the emotional and life experience of a homicide policeman.
It's a Hollywood movie in a great tradition, and it's perhaps by no accident that I first thought of it as a way to think of it was going to Hollywood as if it was 1934, and the studio assigned me that, and it was a kind of freedom from the tyranny of finding things that match something of your own sensibility.
I was under contract to 20th Century Fox at the time, and I got a fantastic deal. For $25,000, I would get a rewrite and a year's option on the property. I thought Fox would never fight me on that. And I send the script down, and we go into a meeting with the head of the studio, and he says, Ed, we don't make rural pictures. And I looked at him and I said, well, I mean, what does that statement mean? Is it a good script? Is it a bad script? My associate was really in tears, and I told him, listen, we're going to grow up here. We're going to buy it. And I took an option on the script. And in 7 weeks, we rewrote the script down to 124 pages.
Well, my interest in the Amish was as a filmmaker. That was all I had time to register, really. And I learnt on the job, so that was fascinating simply because it was fascinating. And because Americans didn't know much about it, surprisingly. But from the film perspective, which is what I immediately reacted to, it was that, really within the one film, you were having two, not just two cultures, but two time zones. So without it being science fiction, you really had the 19th century and the 21st century in the same frame. These people were living a life from another time. And what a gift to a filmmaker, what a gift to a story.
And I'm trying to think who could play an Amishman in the big hat. And I remember Gary Cooper in Friendly Persuasion. And the only one that I could think of in that marketplace 20 years ago was Harrison Ford. And I sent Harrison's agent the script on a Thursday, and Monday morning he committed. It was unbelievable. I never saw an actor commit so quickly to a script.
I saw an opportunity for a character that was different to what I had been doing. A contemporary character, but existing in the context of a film that had a kind of scale to it that I thought was terrific. The juxtaposition of the modern world and the Amish I thought was good stuff for a movie. And it had a love story that was complicated and difficult. And I thought that was interesting as well.
I thought it was incredibly interesting because I knew nothing about these Amish people. I really loved the opposition of the worlds, the old and the modern.
However, we didn't have a director at that point. So my wife and I had seen The Year of Living Dangerously, and I thought that was a fantastic picture. And I said, as we were walking out, I said, that's a director, Peter Weir.
I was very interested in Peter Weir from work of his that I had seen. I think it was probably Year of Living Dangerously that most impressed me. But again, it's not just one film, it's a body of work and what seems to be the nature of a director that interests me, plus his manipulation of film, his craft skill.
It was 1984. In the first month of that year, January, I was in Central America in the last days of a survey for a film that I wanted to make. Called The Mosquito Coast, which I subsequently did make. But it unraveled. The finance just slipped through our fingers. So I flew home, bitterly disappointed. I hadn't really ever had it happen before. It was dead.
Now, I must say, Harrison was in Europe making one of the Indiana Jones movies, and he was very loyal to me, unbelievable. He stuck with me for almost 5 months without a director really involved, until one day I hear that Peter Weir's picture has been put in turnaround.
So I called my agent and said, I'm ready to work. And not only am I ready to work, I wanted to work out of the country. I'd made 5 feature films in Australia, 2 television films, and I was like, I wanted fresh stimulation. I wanted stories in other cultures. I wanted to work in America or in Europe.
I called my agent up, who was also his agent. I said, listen, get this script down to Australia. He said, he's never going to do this movie. It's another cop movie. And I said, well, if you don't send it, I'll send it. And I sent it down by FedEx, one of those companies. And 4 nights later, I got a call from Peter Weir in Australia. Ed, I'm coming up to Los Angeles. I want to do your movie.
Well, when Harrison and I first met, which was within days of arriving in the country, I went up to his country farm, ranch, and we got straight down to talking. And right away, what impressed me about him, he's a very famous figure from George and Stevens films, but I didn't know whether that would make it difficult to work with him. He was on the back of cereal packets, This is a kid, my children had toys, with his face on them.
I think sometimes a foreign director can be disadvantaged by language if he doesn't speak English and understand the nuances of English. But Australians speak something like English. So I think, he brings a perspective on American culture to the film that I think was very useful.
I thought if the interview with Harrison doesn't go well, if I don't like him, I won't do it. I'm not about to get into difficulties with a superstar. That didn't happen. In fact, the reverse. We got on wonderfully, and in the right way. It wasn't any kind of buddy-matey, back-patting thing. It was really two professionals trying to solve some problems here and get an approach to a film that's been done many times before. Maybe not with Amish, but same sort of idea. Anyway, none of that, a total professional. And I was most interested in his desire to get the details of the working life of a policeman exactly right.
I did a lot of research with the Philadelphia Police Department. One of the other things that's really extraordinary about this film is that we had but 8 weeks of pre-production. That's not really much at all. And we had a lot of research to do. Peter went away and covered the research of the Amish community, and I went away to do the research of the police department. And then we came together and shared what we had learned.
It's very difficult, when you take on a cliched kind of part, the cop. How is your version going to be different? And I'm thrilled to watch Harrison make it his own. And, he went out with the homicide squad and, in a way that was probably somewhat foolhardy or dangerous. But again, I understood why he did it. I was very fortunate. Diane Crittenden, I must say, as my casting director, did a superb job. And she brought Lukas to me, amongst other children, and showed me some film that he'd just recently been in. And he was luminous.
The director who directed my first film, Testament, she was going to be directing Witness. Her name is Lynn Littman, and I'm not sure what happened, but Peter ended up doing it, and she suggested me.
Quite a unique child, and in fact a unique human being. And he got the part pretty much from the time he read for it or sat opposite me.
I was so young, but I went into like a little room, and I think there was like a glass window, and Peter came out and shook my hand, and then went back behind the window with the the video camera, and then there was a woman here reading with me, and I was just kind of like, all right, here we go. Then I got it, I think, pretty much right afterwards.
The hard part I had to find was Kelley, McGillis, so the part of Rachel. I was getting nowhere. Because the girls that I was seeing, were meant to come from this community that, as I say, is almost like a time warp. They're not faking it. They're not just wearing clothes. They're Amish on the inside. Now you try and get an actress to come in to read of the right age, which was somewhere in the 20s. And my first screen tests were generally just silent. I'd play some music or something, but just looking at the person to see what information was coming through without any words. And I had a bonnet and, we'd give some sort of external thing. And the majority of them, just that plus the reading, were too hip, too knowing. There wasn't any innocence that I found meeting Amish people, seeing them. And I went and saw Ed Feldman, the producer. I said, Ed, I think we've got to cast outside the country. We've got to go elsewhere. There's a lack of kind of a womanliness in some of these young women. They're sexy, but not womanly. And he said, what do you mean? I said, I think we should look in Italy. He said, Italy? And I said, well, I think Italian girls, I don't know what you think, Ed. You did get a fairly frank kind of conversation in a moment like this. I think Italian girls are very womanly. I like Italian women. He said, well, okay. So we got a casting agent in Rome and looked at film, and we got an Italian actress, and she was standing by to come over for a screen test when Kelley came in. And she left her roller skates outside. Initially seemed to be the very kind of person that was too contemporary. But the minute she put the bonnet on and sat down in front of me and read some lines, I thought, oh my God, this is her.
I had met with Peter, and he asked me if I knew about the Amish, and I said, oh yeah, I do. And I didn't. I thought that they were like Quakers. So he said, well, that's great. I'm going to have you come back and read on Monday. This was a Friday. And so I went, holy cow, I have to go find out about Amish people.
Kelley McGillis had only been in one small picture prior to that, and she was working in a coffee house in the village when Peter took Harrison to see her.
And one night Peter and Harrison came by after my shift at work to take me out to dinner to talk to me. And everybody in the restaurant's going, oh my God, that's Harrison Ford, that's Harrison. And I said, I know.
Now came the key casting of the other love interest in the story, really. This young man in the script was described as being physically very strong. He had arms like hams, I remember. And I thought that won't work. Here, the challenge of this movie, it's a love story in which the lovers don't get together, which is kind of the tradition of a love story since, I don't know, Romeo and Juliet. It's part of the pain of the love story. Therefore, when Harrison, John Book, leaves, the person that she is left with to make a life had to be somebody that you would accept. And you would think, well, it may not be what they both wanted, but this will work. So we see a number of actors. And Diane one day said to me, I bumped into an old friend of mine, Alexander Goodenough, and she said, he hasn't got any acting experience, but what a charming man he is. So I said, well, let's have a look. And he came in, and he really was not an actor.
Goodenough was a great casting coup, a genius idea. He had never acted before, and I admit, a little bit resistant to it. I thought, geez, why are we going to take a ballet dancer and try and turn him into an actor on the day? But his nature, his quality was exactly right for that character.
What a charming smile, and what an interesting, charming man. And from another culture, from Russia. A defector, his story somewhat known, I would think. A story of great pain and great sacrifice and great adventure. And so he got the part. Because I didn't know it was his first movie. I knew he didn't have much experience. And he got the part because he had the look. I mean, he had that wonderful open face, guileless. And the minute he stuck his head into the audition, it was clear he was going to work as an Amishman.
I had just started really acting. I was living in New York at the time. And on the same day that I was offered a small part, 2 days' work, with a director named Peter Weir in Witness, I guess it was late spring 1984. I had also the same day been offered the part of a soldier in Henry V, Shakespeare in the part. So it was kind of, looking back at it now, it was kind of a crossroads. I chose to go down to Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and do this because it was something that I wanted to learn more about. I guess I owe a sort of debt to Peter in that sense because my experience was so good working for him. My impression of what it was like to work on movies, on a movie set, was such a good one that I sort of then focused more on doing that, I guess. My later experiences in movies over the past 20 years have not always been as good.
It was great because I was getting into this whole Amish thing, and this to me was the unknown part of the story. The rest of it was more familiar, the cop and corruption and the police force and on the run. And that's where Ed and I clashed, because he said, Peter, you're making this kind of Amish thing, and I said, yes, but Ed, the Amish this and the Amish that, and it's fascinating. And he said, yeah, well, it's all very well, but you're making a Western, And I said, my God, how dare you, sir? It was like that. I thought about what he said, and I thought he's right. This is a genre picture. But it became a very good collaboration between the two of us.
As good as the script was, I think it underwent some genesis that made it a little bit more particular, a little bit more complicated. Peter's interest in the relationship between John Book and the young boy enlivened, I think, that aspect of the film. The way he graded and colored and handled the love story, I think, brought a lot to the film.
I did a pass on it, and I got the writers to do some work, but essentially, it was always a very good structure and a very good idea. It was only had about 4 working parts. It was like a very simple mechanism. And I thought what was wrong with it was, from my point of view, was that just a case of emphasis and tone. 1,000 tiny details, really. Plus another real look at the ending. It just didn't feel that it resolved well enough in terms of the Amish.
The ending of the film was the area we all felt was the weakest. The Danny Glover character, my nemesis, and the bad guy of the movie, ends up meeting justice at the hands of a mule. And, I wasn't going to go all that way and not have a hand in dispensing justice to the bad guy.
People would tell you stories. You'd meet Amish people eventually. Although that was a little difficult because we got kind of banned by the Amish community in a subtle way. An ex-Amishman decided that we were Hollywood and very bad for the kind of image of the community, and that all Amish, he suggested to the elders, should not deal with us.
We had Amish consultants who were really from schools, because the Amish don't want to be part of it. They don't want to be part of it. They don't want to, we'll rent you our wagons, we'll do anything you want, but be on screen.
There were some advisors on there, but the real Amish were and are averse to being photographed and so forth. So, there's a certain distance there, but if you're polite and so forth, you can certainly talk with them.
Frankly, it was important that critics, at least, were not able to blame the success of the film on Steven Spielberg or George Lucas, professionally speaking. They had to sort of acknowledge that Peter and I had something to do with it, and because Peter had not made an American film, it was a big break for Peter also to reach a popular audience.
Even though I was in such awe of now having a star of the magnitude of Harrison Ford in front of the camera, he was just so helpful in all ways. I don't like putting demands on actors. I feel that unless they've got good motor controls, and Harrison has got extraordinary motor controls, he can do anything physically and never lose sight of what he has to do with the character and the performance. Load guns, drive cars, all of that is second nature to him. And there are times when you do ask an actor, and need to ask an actor, would it be all right if, and he would just say, yep, just tell me what you want. And I'd just say quickly, and he'd say, I'll do it. And he did it every time.
I don't really remember what was on the page. I do remember working very closely with Peter at creating this person who was pretty complex. That was really fun and interesting to me. And to develop that character and her humanity and her rebelliousness as time went on.
She immersed herself completely in the part. She went and lived with an Amish family for a period before the film to get the accent right.
Kelley was like a real mother figure to me, and she would cuddle with me and, rock me, and she was always making sure I was okay. And the relationship you see on screen is kind of the kind of relationship we had.
And she had a dialogue coach. The only thing I said was I suggested a dialogue coach leave after a certain period, because there's a point where an accent can become the performance. And I thought we were just coming up to that it was a little too rich. And when she dropped the teacher, and I said, the way you were in a few days ago was great, she just pulled it back a little bit. And I thought she hit it dead center.
And what I would do is I'd go to the farmer's market in Lancaster, and I would record people. And I would barter with them about buying stuff or buy stuff and talk. And that's how I had to learn how to talk. And then also, when I lived with Mary, I would just practice mimicking how she spoke.
Well, John Seale had never made a picture in America. He had been a camera operator under another cameraman for Peter, and but he brought Seale to America. We had to get a waiver from the union, and we had to hire a standby. So in essence, the standby was getting paid more than John Seale.
Mosquito Coast, dumped out due to finances or whatever. And I went back to Australia and started shooting commercials and things. And then Peter rang and said he had another film to do in America. It would happen very quickly, within 6 weeks. He said, I can't say much about it. Harrison Ford's in it. How are you? And I said, I'm right. I just cancelled 3 commercials and was ready to go. So 6 weeks later, we were over in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and prepping for Witness.
For John and I, it was our first collaboration as DOP. I'd worked with Russell Boyne on most of my pictures, John as the operator. And the three of us were a kind of team. Johnny was just amazing with composition and movement. I mean, every facet of operating. Great on the wheels, he just had an eye. And I learned a great deal from him over the years.
I have always been honest and said that I was a realist cameraman. I really don't know any other way to do it. In prep for a picture, we do go to all the locations. I make note with compasses where the sun will be at certain times of the year or the day or whatever. The locations of windows, where that light might fall through there, and go back and use that as I go through the script and think about that scene that we're going to shoot there in 2 months' time, that the sun will have moved a little bit. But I try to look for the reality of light that'll occur at the location.
Before the picture started, we went to the Philadelphia Museum of Art where they had a Vermeer exhibition. And he walks through the face and he turns to John Seale and he says, "This is what I want the picture to look like."
It was a 17th century Dutch masters, and so I'd seen it, and John and I went and looked at it, and there was relevance in the lighting in a number of these paintings and in the mood.
Peter felt that in the Amish farmhouse, that there was a time there of his healing that we could use some of the old Dutch masters' lighting techniques, and Vermeer seemed to win. He did win.
The stillness in the kind of feeling of another time that those pictures give you. They disturb your view of time in a way. I think you can feel the clocks ticking somehow more slowly as you look at these paintings.
I love working fast. Can't stand breaking for lunch because to me it breaks a pattern of thought, and you eat too much and you end up wanting to sleep instead of work. But I do like to work fast. I think it keeps your brain running. It keeps everything hot, wherever the lamp is on the floor, so that you can quickly, decide a little back kicker over there. Oh, we can use that lamp there because your memory says it's still up there. I've had a lot of compliments over the years from many actors who love that speed, in that they don't fall out of character.
The way I did it back then was my parents would read the script to me a lot. I was learning to read at that time, and I would read through it, and that's still, what I do, is just read the script over and over and over and over again. And after a while, the character sort of becomes so second nature. You can start to develop like other layers that aren't in the script.
When you see him in Union Station, particularly in the bathroom when all this stuff starts happening, these shocking things, it's all as it needed to be. It's all in his eyes, it's all in his face, and it's a very subtle performance.
The one time he ever got rough with me was the scene, where I'm in the stall in the bathroom.
I had, of course, decided that I'd split the scene up so that Lukas didn't have to look at the sort of throat-cutting scene in the toilet in the station. That was logical, young fellow, and so when I came to do his half of it, I realised that he would have to go beyond his abilities.
There was nothing there to really trigger me, and it probably was one of my first experiences doing something like that, where I was having to be emotional over something that I wasn't really watching. But the reality was that I wasn't getting there. I wasn't, whether that was tape or anything else, I wasn't getting there, and he helped me get there.
And he was thinking, what am I going to do? Because I sort of have to get him up to the level of this horror for these reaction shots, looking through the little crack in the bathroom. And of course, I knew what was going to happen. We rehearsed it and we shot a couple of takes and it wasn't there. He was, sort of mugging it. He was sort of acting. And I said, I went over to his guardian lady and I said, listen, I'm going to have to talk to Lukas quite intensely. I'm not going to frighten him, but I am going to be very strong because this is critical. So I went off to one side with Lukas and I said, Lukas, I need your help here. This is not working. You're looking at something that you've never seen, and I've only ever seen it acted, thank goodness, but it's not going to work if I don't feel, you are such a young, innocent person from the Amish world, and this is a violation of all your innocence.
And so he said, Lukas, you're ruining the scene, you've got to get it together, and that freaked me out. And so that was the take that they used. I was really freaked out and scared.
Anyway, somehow that young boy, got into this spot, into this space, and did it. And I asked him later about it and about the way he did the acting generally, and he said, well, you know, I just get inside the bubble. And inside the bubble, I can do that, and then I step outside of the bubble. And that was the only clue that I got to his unquestionably artistic process. Interesting when you see it demonstrated by one so young. There was a line of a poet, Gwen Harwood, words can never say as music can the unsayable grace that leaps like light from mind to mind. There are some things which are simply inexpressible. And, you know, in the frustration of trying to communicate what might be wrong, which can be on both sides, and not just me saying something's not working, or I can't express what I want to about a scene. But you might be saying, what's wrong with the scene, you know? What are you after? And sometimes I can put a piece of music and say, I don't know what it is in that music, but it's what I'm after is in there. It's that feeling.
It's 4:30, time for milking.
There were moments of real perception about sort of modern life, and then there were moments of great humor, really some funny stuff in that movie.
Harrison and I cooked up a scene where he's got up early to milk the cows, and he's just, you know, something completely alien to this man. And then he's in the kitchen talking, and they're having breakfast, and he's got that dry kind of humour that's so Harrison. And I said, what would you be talking about? What kind of dialogue can we have? And I said, maybe you should mention television. They don't have television. And he said, oh, I'd like to talk about a television commercial that I once went up for as a young actor.
Honey, that's great coffee. It's a joke. It's a commercial.
And everyone looks at him, and he looks and he says, it's from a television commercial. And then you realise they don't have it. Now, that was from, I think it was Folger's Coffee, and he went up for the job and didn't get it as a young man. When I came up with the scene, it was Harrison's choice of music. Sam Cooke he knew and from his past, and, you know, although these films are fiction and we're just cooking up a story to entertain people, it's amazing how many, if you can put sort of artefacts and things from your life, or little details, or props to words, that were, in a sense, tested in life, came from life, then you can only but enrich what you're doing and give it some kind of a truth or an approximation of a truth.
Peter let me pick the music since I had to dance to it, and I kept trying to figure out what to use. And when we came up with the idea of that, he sparked to it.
I think it's kind of a sort of synopsis of the best of what's in that film, that sort of aching innocence of the young girl, Rachel, and of Book, who in a way reverts to his adolescent self.
The choreography was improvised and then nailed down so we could, you know, replicate it and shoot it and things. But Peter was very good about giving the actors a lot of opportunity to discover a natural way of telling the story.
All I remember about that scene, it was so awfully hot because it was summer. We were in the barn, in a blacked out barn. During the day, it was, first off, in the car with that freaking little lamp between us, generating more heat. It was miserable. And I kept on thinking, why do we have to do this during the day under a blacked out barn? Can't we do this at night with the doors open? I mean, I didn't know anything about scheduling movies at that point, but that made no sense to me.
I think in every script that I tackle, there'll be a scene or sequences that become some sort of prime drive for me. And in Witness, it was the building of the barn, which was a kind of paragraph in the script or something. They build the barn, you know, and there were looks between Book and Rachel and so on, you know. So there were kind of little subtle things going on, a little tension hinted at. But apart from that, you know, it was pretty much a fast day shoot, a day because of the logistics. Yet I knew that there was something in there much, much greater than that, that in films, I think to a degree, we love seeing things built. With all the violence we have in films, I think in actual fact, people enjoy the building of something at least as much as they enjoy it being knocked down. But you really see something being built or constructed or made.
It was a really genius scene. And one of the things about this film is that we were pretty short on money, budget. And that scene was shot in one day. That barn was raised in one day, but we did not do it without the aid of a crane that was standing just behind the camera to lift ready made sections of the barn frame into place. But it was a long, tough day. I've never worked on a barn raising, but I'd done some timber framing, and I certainly had done enough carpentry at that point in my life to inform the way I use tools.
I knew it would be great to hear the sound of the hammers, and I knew it would be wonderful to see children learning the trade of their fathers, and there would be just a pleasure in something lost. Fundamentally a community that worked together without payment. You come over and work on my barn, and one day we'll come and work on yours, type of thing. And that we would have a tremendous and genuine and real nostalgia for a part of our culture that is now no longer there.
As Sidney Pollack says, foreplay is everything in movies, and nobody wants to watch anybody make love. They just want to watch people fall in love. And that's why that relationship is such strength, is because it is doomed from the get-go not to happen. The nature of the characters is such that when push comes to shove, push is not going to come to shove. So the tension remains.
There's a certain shamelessness about it, and he can't deal with that. It's his shame. It's not her shame. It's a challenge, but not a sexual challenge. And perhaps the sexual thing was in Peter's mind, in making that scene. But as a character, I don't think it was in my mind.
I think it was in the script originally. It was much bigger incident. I think there was something much more horrible happened. I can't remember, and I wanted to reduce it just to the single, something smaller but satisfying nonetheless. In fact, the day we shot it, was a lot of Amish in the street watching from a distance and chuckling and nudging each other because they'd been through the situation many times. Violence, it's an emotion, and it's rather fascinating. I think, like sex on screen, sometimes the anticipation is the most part of the enjoyment. The potential is most enjoyable. The unpredictability of a human being who lives outside the moral code is strangely thrilling. The sense they might do anything. And Danny Glover managed to bring that to his part he played. As Joseph Sommer brought another aspect of someone, somebody who knows they are breaking the moral law and are involved in foul work that will come back to haunt them. And they're two aspects, in a sense, of evil, I suppose. The shootings and various things at the end there, I tried to be original and use the location, found that sort of corn storage area and thought, asked some questions about that, could you be asphyxiated by it and so on. And yes, there have been accidents, they told me, where corn's dropped and other grain, and buried people. And you only have so long before you're breathing in the dust.
The grain silo gag with the dropping corn was something we came up with either on the day we shot it or the day before. I remember we were rushing around to find a dive shop which could rent us a scuba diver's breathing mask and bottle of oxygen to put under the corn.
It was dangerous, strangely. It looked dangerous because it looked quite easy go, the opposite. That was just a nice sunny day and we're filming in a silo and there's corn, what's to worry? And we're going to drop it, which we did, drop it and slowly bury the character. Had to get the camera inside and close the door. And so the gas was buried under the corn. He had to know exactly where it was. I'm sure we had a safety officer watching. Nonetheless, there was a critical moment where the shot would end when the actor could no longer hold his breath with safety and reached for the mouthpiece. And so it was quite a tense bit of filming, really, as he was buried. There are moments which, you're glad when they're over, really. It's not worth somebody getting killed over or injured. The studio objected to a cut I made at the end of the movie. The picture ended with the penultimate scene between Harrison and Kelley, between Rachel and Brooke, saying goodbye. And off he went in his little car. And there was 2 pages of dialogue. And basically each told the other how they felt and why they couldn't stay together or whatever, express their feelings in words. And I ripped it out. And it became one line, you know, saying they look at each other and they know it cannot be. The studio flew in to see me on location and said, I believe you've cut the 2 pages, Peter. I mean, there's a danger we won't know how they feel. There's a danger if this picture doesn't end in the way it needs to. And I said, absolutely, I agree with you. But you can't put it in words. If I haven't done my job in the movie, then, you know, it's not going to work anyway. We should know how they feel. You know, I was delighted with the result of that we got from the work. But I've always thought it was a very slight film, very light film, and didn't think it would age well. I thought it was like wine to be drunk in the season. And to my surprise, I would see it hang on. You know, it would come up on television a lot. And, you know, as the years passed and I'd travel about, people would say they'd seen it for the umpteenth time, which is rather surprising, but given this very light weight and its familiarity in a way as a genre. But I think there's something about the elements and about the individuals who played the parts that is rather soothing.
What I hope is there more than entertainment is an emotional experience, an opportunity to invest in the lives of the characters and to have an experience of empathy with them, to know how they feel. And to have that experience in a dark room with a lot of other people. I always thought it was the most genuine experience in our lives is to, without words, participate in an emotional experience with a lot of other people.
For all my dreaming of wanting, I'm going to cry. For all my dreaming of wanting to be an actress when I grew up, to be able to be given a gift, like to be able to work with Peter and Harrison and Jan and Alexander, everybody, is much more than anybody could ever hope for. For that opportunity, I am so grateful. It certainly set the bar pretty friggin' high for the future, which was really, really tough to come to terms with what the reality is.